Hi, this is Patrick Chalmers with Democracy Talk. I'm talking from the World Forum for Democracy in Strasbourg, France. And I've got with me a very interesting woman here from Australia. She's called Carson. She is the research director and board member for the New Democracy Foundation, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she does. So, Carson, what do you do?
What do I do? Well, let me tell you what the New Democracy Foundation does, which is probably more interesting than what I do. The New Democracy Foundation is a research foundation with charitable status in Australia, and we convene experiments in democratic innovation. They're experiments that have a real-life purpose. We started, our very first project with this was the Australian Citizens Parliament, where we randomly selected 150 people from around Australia, one from every electorate, and brought them together for 4 days and discussed how to strengthen Australia's political system to serve us better. And that in many ways set the scene for everything that followed. We, I think, did a fantastic job with that project, and it didn't have a great deal of influence. So we know that we were able to gather together through random selection, a civic lottery, a beautiful microcosm, a cross-section of a population. We know that we were able to bring them together and do some very deep deliberation, to expose them to expert knowledge, to give them opportunities to ask questions, to talk to each other, and to come up with recommendations. What we were not so successful with was that crucial influence that we wanted to see those people have. So they made recommendations and it didn't go very far. So since then, all the projects that we've done, we've tried to build in those three ideals: representation through random selection, deliberation through sufficient time and a blank sheet for them to be able to come up with some meaningful recommendations. And we only do projects now where we think that there is a high degree of influence or impact with the decision maker. So typically we're asked by a government to convene a project, a citizens' jury most often, to deliberate on very disparate things: dog and cat regulation, how to create a safe and vibrant nightlife in a city that might have experienced violence and drunkenness, participatory budgets, where on one occasion, in Melbourne, that group of people determined a budget for Melbourne City Council over a 10-year period. So it was a $4 billion budget.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's ever been done anywhere else. It's usually a component of a budget that is deliberated upon in other places. So we're excited by the things we've been able to achieve. We've just finished a huge project looking at nuclear waste storage in South Australia, which involved 50 randomly selected people. It then went out to the entire South Australian population and ended up with 350 randomly selected people to make some recommendations to the Premier. So that's the kind of work that we do.
And so you've used loads of words there that probably... No, but it's totally fine.
And they have multiple syllables too.
So I'm confused.
Deliberative democracy, yeah.
But I'm just going to get you just to come back on a couple of them. So we're here at a forum for democracy, and democracy, we normally think about elections, and obviously there's one today with the US, but there's elections all the time around the world.
Yeah.
What's the big difference between elections and random selection?
We have no interest in elections unless they're randomly selected, as they were in ancient Athens, where sortition, or people were elected by lot. There's different terms that are used to describe that. But the idea being that everyone has an equal opportunity to serve. And we're interested in that aspect of it, which is why we use random selection. So we're interested in how you hear from the voices of those who are typically not heard from. We know that we can hear from the incensed and the articulate. Anytime we call a public meeting, we're likely to hear from them. But we don't hear from people who really have a stake in the issue. And when they deliberate together, in fact, come up with some entirely reasonable recommendations, often creative solutions that have not been thought of. But to us, it's a fantastic way of involving people in their own decision making.
I mean, I like the sound of it, I have to say, so I'm entirely biased, and I declare my bias on that one. It sounds very interesting. And what are you most proud of in the work that you've done at the foundation?
Yeah, I think at the moment it changes all the time. At the moment, I'm terribly enthusiastic about some work I'm doing with critical thinking, because I see that as something that is terribly absent from the political landscape. And not just from citizens, but from politicians. And I think we don't interrogate expert knowledge and expertise very well. And I've been working quite a lot with randomly selected citizens in enhancing their critical capacities. All of this, by the way, we make available to anyone who wants it. We have a website that is available to everyone in the world. So that's exciting me at the moment. I'm excited by the changes that we've made to a method called the Citizens Jury, which used to be 12 to 15 people over 5 consecutive days. It was developed by Ned Crosby in the US, and a fantastic democratic innovator. And we've been modifying it to suit Australian conditions, Australian circumstances. We typically work with 40 people, although, as I mentioned, we were working with 350 in South Australia. So I'm interested in the way that we're modifying different methods and sharing the innovations with others. I think we're doing some great work in Australia, and we've developed a fantastic reputation worldwide now for the work that we are doing.
I actually, as a 19-year-old in Australia, in Queensland, I went to see your election process, which already is relatively innovative as election processes go. So it's probably a little-known fact that Australia is a democracy innovator. You know, so here we are in Europe, we're in a European Parliament building, or one that they use in the European Union. And probably a lot of the people from Europe don't realise the extent that you are innovators. So it's interesting to have you here.
We developed the secret ballot, as you probably know, which used to be called the Australian ballot. We were the second after New Zealand to give women the vote. I think we were the first in the world to give women an opportunity to be elected to Parliament. Interestingly, in South Australia, where we're doing the project that we're doing now. So South Australia may be amongst the more innovative states in Australia.
And so, last question now, as we wrap up. What's your ambition for the work? You're here in Europe. What are you up to? What do you want to do next?
We'd love to partner with people in Europe who are doing similar work. We co-founded, there were 3 people who founded New Democracy, and Luca Belgiorno Nettis is an Italian. He has a strong European background, and I think it would be fantastic for Australia and Europe to be partnering in this exercise of democratic innovation. So I can see circumstances in which we could do a comparative project. We're doing a very interesting project at the moment looking at local government reform, and I think that's something that could be done in Europe, and we could do a bit of compare and contrast to see what are the similarities, what are the differences, but to support each other in this activity.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Thank you also to the Council of Europe for this extraordinary setup of the journalistic provision, which is great. So you are Carson, you are from the New Democracy Foundation, and I am Patrick Chalmers from Democracy Talk. Thanks very much for watching.